respects.
Our reporter Phil McDonald there. Now we're talking about the late Queen tonight. The Queen was patron of loads of charities. One of them was the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association, or SSAFA. Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory is the charity's CEO, and he's the Master Gunner St James's Park, one of the most senior positions in the Royal Artillery. He's been telling me about SSAFA's origins.
Formed in 1885, it was set up to look after families when troops and ships went overseas. And since then, we have merged into an organisation that looks after those in the military, veterans and their families in many, many different ways. We support about 70,000 people each year. Our core role is being the front line of the military charity sector with over 4,000 volunteers who visit those in need.
How long did the Queen have a relationship with the charity?
So Her Majesty was our patron from 1952, taking over from Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. But before that, she was involved in the charity. She, during the war, went and visited, took parcels to people in need. So Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was involved with the charity for over 80 years.
So she had quite an affinity with the charity. How important do you think the work of SSAFA was to the late Queen?
So I think it was a two-way relationship. I think, firstly, Her Majesty was incredibly important to the charity. We were so lucky to have her as our patron for over 70 years. We've been equally lucky to have His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent as our president these last 40 years. And between the two of them, their values, they inspire people, staff and volunteers across the charity. But I had the privilege of going to brief Her Majesty, have an audience with her on a couple of occasions, both to talk about my role in the Royal Artillery and also about SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity. She was interested, she was knowledgeable, and as many others have said these last 48 hours, she was wise and her comments were constructive and helpful. I think we were very privileged that she kept her role as our patron when she started to slim down. I believe it was important to her.
And we'll definitely get to those meetings between the two of you in just a moment or two. But I just wonder if you could explain to us, because many listeners at home might not know what this role entails. But when we're saying that the Queen was the patron of a charity, or in this case, the patron of the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association, what kind of role is that? What would she do as patron?
The last time she formally came to visit us was in 2013, when our head office moved from just south of London Bridge to just north of London Bridge. And on that day, everyone who was present remembers exactly where they were, what they were wearing, what Her Majesty said to them. As a patron, you don't get involved in the detailed work, and nor would one expect her to do that. But she was informed. We would periodically write to her private secretary and brief her, and we would get feedback from that Her Majesty appreciated the updates, and that was quite enough. Prince Michael is a little bit more hands-on, and those two individuals help motivate, not least because they are both wonderful supporters of the armed forces community.
What difference do you think it made that the Queen was the patron of the charity than someone else being the patron of the charity? What difference was it that it was her that was there?
It's a hypothetical question, isn't it? Because we were lucky enough to have Her Majesty as our patron. I think any patron, particularly a royal patron, helps inspire. We were privileged enough to have Her Majesty as our patron, and her continuity, her wisdom, the many, many words that have been said these last 48 hours, her sense of duty, her sense of service, the way she epitomized the values that I think we should all seek to follow, genuinely inspired people in the charity.
And duty and service, as you've just said, were were things very close to Queen Elizabeth's heart. And do you think that's why she herself wanted to be patron of a charity like yours that does support service personnel and their families, something that was very close to her heart and to her family?
Yes, I think it was. I mean, Her Majesty served in the armed forces during the Second World War. All her children have been very closely involved in the armed forces, and her grandchildren. They are her, or were, they're now King Charles's armed forces, but they were her armed forces. And her interest in them and commitment to them and desire to ensure that the people who served in her armed forces and their families and veterans were appropriately recognised for that service to the nation was overwhelming, and it transfused our work in the charity.
Now, the Queen was Captain General of the Royal Artillery. So what does that mean exactly?
So the Queen, Her Majesty, was Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and for some parts of the Armed Forces, she had a closer relationship. And for the Royal Regiment of Artillery, she was our Captain General. That is the head of the regiment. Mm. And on her behalf, I am what is called the Master Gunner, St James's Park. I represent her, and I had the privilege of both accompanying her on visits and going to brief her to keep her informed about her regiment.
Now, you obviously had a relationship with her in terms of you being the Master Gunner, St James's Park, and the Queen, the Captain General of the Royal Artillery. As a senior military officer, does it ever become ordinary to you or commonplace when you meet a monarch, when you have that relationship with a monarch? Or does it always feel just a little bit surreal?
It never becomes commonplace. To say a little bit surreal, it is just the most enormous privilege and honour. I would like to think I'm a reasonably confident individual. But the night before my first audience with Her Majesty, I didn't sleep a wink. I had thought through what I wanted to say. And there I was briefing somebody who had done her job longer than I have been alive. And her perceptiveness and her wisdom very much kept me on my toes. So, no, it never, ever became commonplace. It is a privilege for anybody to meet our monarch. And Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was a quite extraordinary individual.
And did those nerves go away at all when you did meet her in person? Because obviously we build things up in our heads, and you're saying the night before you could barely sleep. But when you actually got to meet her and you saw her face to face and you spoke with her, did it seem less nervous, or were those nerves still there?
Her Majesty had an extraordinary ability to relax people, and two occasions. Firstly, a one-to-one audience. I think anybody going in to meet their monarch, to meet Her Majesty, would be nervous, and she allowed me to get my points across, to converse, and that was very special. On another occasion, the 19th of October 2017, Her Majesty came to review the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, and I had the privilege as the Master Gunner of accompanying her round. That date was very special because 70 years to the day before that, her father, His Majesty King George VI, had reviewed what was then called the Riding Troop, Royal Horse Artillery. And at the end of the visit, when asked to sign the visitor's book, he crossed out the word riding and wrote Kings. And that is why it is called the King's Troop. And Her Majesty said that should remain when she took to the throne. And during that day, she went round, she met young soldiers and their families, the moment of a lifetime for them. And for each and every one of them, she made it feel special for them. And that is an extraordinary ability.
For a lot of our listeners, and for me, myself, I have never met the Queen and now will never meet the Queen. Was she as she seemed? In everything we see in all these archive films that we're watching on the television, across the news footage, what we're 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 across